Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim, and this is another Real Ideal Gear review. Today I have my second oldest son, Noah, from Minneapolis. They're out, all four of my boys are out here in Montana visiting for about a week, and my oldest son, Josiah, is behind the camera, and we'll get a picture of him up there, and I'll introduce him that way to you. But he's running the sound and making sure everything. Right now, we've already gone through some sound issues, some lighting issues, but we're just going to go through this anyway. So this will kind of be. I would just think we should make this an uncut version. Let's just go, front to back and get this done.
This is the type of content you subscribe to.
Right, exactly. Okay, so today we're talking about collection habits and the differences between what Noah's perspective is on collecting, the difference that I have. And although there are differences, there are a lot of similarities. So we may be splitting some hairs on certain things. It may be on the quantity side, but we're really we'll be talking about a lot of similar things.
Yeah, we're not polar opposites.
No, not at all. So, but we want for the audience out there to see that there's different perspectives on this, and there's different ways to approach this. Neither one of us is right now a luxury-minded collector. I'm not, and I don't have a lot of desire to go that route anyway because I have other reasons for it.
We are one lottery ticket away from being in that category.
Right. So you're going to see a lot of affordable watches, bargain watches, maybe some used. I got a few used watches that I really enjoy. So, and the funny thing is, I'll just say this aside, I've already mentioned this once before, but my wife, she loves getting into this watches. She says, well, I've got X number of watches that I get to wear too when you buy them. I was like, well, that's kind of true actually. So, but so the collection thing, it is a very unique personal thing. And there's certainly personality that goes into it. I look at what Noah has, and there's some stories behind the watches, but I'm starting to see personality in our conversations about watches, what he likes, what I like, and at the same time, we're kind of going down similar paths around it. So let's go and talk a little bit about your journey. Start from the very beginning real quick. Just kind of give a background of just watches and your desire around watches over, a couple of decades.
Yeah. So first watches that got me into it are not here because they are destroyed. But it kind of started around 2016. I was a sophomore in high school, and I was on this cruise trip, and my brother was wearing this Seiko 5, and I really liked the look of it. And I kind of wanted to be able to wear a watch. I thought it kind of made you look a little bit higher end for just events and kind of walking around. Watches are cool. I mean, I don't think
Just you higher end?
I guess so.
He's higher end, okay.
He's a high roller on the ship, which is why I bought his $50 watch or $100 watch. I think at the time that was a $60 watch.
This is about $75.
Yeah, and now that's about $200, so.
Yeah, times have changed in the last 5 years.
Inflation. But that was the first watch that really got me into it. I wore that thing all the time, and I got it a friend, which was one of the MVMT movement watches that were blowing up at the time, the fashion watches with all the marketing, which definitely got to me, so I bought one of those. And I wore that one a good amount. I didn't necessarily like it as much as the Seiko, but it was kind of the minimalist on leather, so it kind of covered a different category in my mind, which we'll kind of get into a little bit more here in a second. But I did like the metal look of the bracelet. I think that kind of makes a watch, or maybe used to think that it made a watch look a little bit more higher end. But that shattered unexpectedly in my dorm room freshman year of college. So I'm not calling anyone out there, but something happened.
Okay.
But yeah, that one was shattered. My movement watch was lost for a while, and then the battery died. So I was kind of out of the watch world for probably a year, half a year, something around there, until I got my first Apple Watch, which was a different world. Big kind of Apple technology fan, so I kind of have all their stuff. I'm like, well, I kind of like watches. I wore them in the past. Why not kind of combine these two interests that I have? So I wore that one around. Has the fitness tracking, the activity stuff, the heart rate. It's really cool to see that data. That kind of got me excited about watches again. So I'd wear that, work out, be able to see all the workouts, and be like, awesome progress. I can see all that right on my wrist. But then I got reintroduced by somebody. His name was Tim Johnson of Real Ideal Gear. I got this Tissot PRC 200 for an early graduation gift, and that was sweet. I mean, this thing looks awesome. It immediately did get me back into watches as far as like mechanical. This is quartz, but the more
analog,
non-smart watches.
Right.
And so I'd wear this to fancy stuff, wear this if I was going out somewhere and I wanted to look a little bit better. Not that the Apple Watch doesn't look great in all its single color glory. But I'm back in the watch world. That was kind of the jumping off point. Number 2, also from Real Ideal Gear. This was kind of a shipping mistake by Amazon. So thank you, Amazon, actually, for giving me this watch. They shipped the wrong watch to you.
Yep.
And I got the other one. So that was it's a good deal. Free watch. My third watch, get this, Real Ideal gift for Christmas. And this was the Komatsu, another watch that you owned for a little bit. I had kind of been talking about possibly getting one, and you were just like, all right, I'll give you mine. So yes, the one from his channel is mine now.
Yeah, so I no longer have that reviewed watch.
Yeah.
So you got to this point where, in some ways, I think the Apple Watch or the smartwatches for some folks is kind of a bridge or an initiation into watches, or a continuation, in your case, from a couple watches you had before that. And it provides a great value or a great purpose for whatever that smartwatch is set up to do. I mean, it's a great watch. Highly customizable. You can personalize it. All kinds of great stuff. Me personally, I just don't like the connectivity. I'm not as interested in being connected to a lot of stuff as I was when I was in administration stuff. So.
And I'm the opposite. I send all my health data right to the government.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
No. So anyway, so you've got in this table right here, you got 3 watches going, and has the bug bitten as far as a collection, and as far as how you're thinking of, like, these are the things I want to address, or like what's going on there?
Yeah. So if you noticed, Real Ideal Gear, Real Ideal Gear, Real Ideal Gear. So far, the only watch that I've kind of gotten myself was the Apple Watch. So I needed a little bit more skin in the game. And I had to go for a G-Shock because I had a job that kind of didn't require it, but I didn't want to wear my Apple Watch and get that all scratched up, or one of my nicer watches. So I thought, hey, we'll get a digital G-Shock, which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't like all the bulky circular kind of designs, but the square was simple enough. I mean, it's kind of a classic.
It's kind of smaller of the G-Shocks.
Yeah. So that fit. I got that one. $50 on Amazon because college kids have so much money after they graduate. So I broke the bank and bought a $50 watch. But that's where the collection journey is today. So I'm at 4 watches.
5
watches.
Who's splitting hairs here?
Right.
So okay, so now you've got the 5 watches. What's your philosophy moving forward? This is kind of like the present and history. What about like when you look at what are you focusing on in the future? Like, ideally, these are my intentions going forward.
So recently, I mean, I'm just kind of perusing the internet all the time for watches. I think a lot of people that are interested in watches are just constantly looking at different pictures or videos of watches, and it's kind of gone in the luxury section, which was partially a thing that I did so I wouldn't spend a bunch more money on watches because, remember, college kids that just graduated have a ton of money. But also I kind of started to get more into kind of the high-end design. Not that I could afford it, but I can just kind of appreciate it from afar for now. But the watch world is a cult. Don't let anyone ever tell you that it's not. Because if you were to tell someone, I spent $200, $300 on a watch, they would look at you like, oh my gosh, watches cost that much? Yeah. People know Rolex is being expensive, but for the most part, I don't think people know about kind of the middle ground of, watches are kind of expensive, and they do something that, your phone could do, your Apple Watch could do. So it's a little bit of a cult in that way. But I forgot where I'm going with this point.
That's okay. So, well, it's just kind of like where you're going forward with your watch collection ideas. Like, do you have something like, I would like to collect this kind of a watch or this particular watch?
Yeah. So I want watches that are very different from each other. Now, as far as the watches I have now, these are probably the 2 most similar.
Yeah.
But even then, this is a chronograph, that's a dive watch, so I think those categories kind of separate themselves out enough. So I'm looking for something completely different. So I was kind of eyeing maybe the Tissot PRX as kind of that integrated bracelet style, or just something that's very different from what I have, so I can kind of cover different categories of watches, so that when I wear it, I'm like, cool, I'm wearing this type of watch, which is a little bit different, obviously, than your style of collecting.
Yep. In the suitcase.
Yes, this is definitely not full of watches. But you collect a lot of watches that are not identical,
Yeah.
but are a little bit more similar to each other than maybe the stuff that I have. I have 4 watches here. You maybe have 6,000 watches, but what's kind of the difference there? Why do you collect more watches? Or
So I'm going to back up to when I was a kid, and if you haven't had a chance to watch Dave over at Just the Watch and we did I guess not a podcast, online collaboration on YouTube, and we talked about the history of watches from our youth all the way up to today. And real quickly, I'm just going to go through this. So I've always been interested in watches, and it hasn't been until this last year that it just like was a blazing fire of interest. Prior to that, I was a one watch guy. So I had a watch, and I'm going to show this as an example. So this is one that I've had. This is a Casio triple sensor Pathfinder 200, and it's titanium. I've had this watch for 15 plus years, and I'm guessing it's 15 years. I think it was early 2000s when I got it. But I wore this 24/7 all the time. And so one watch, I was fine. I had no real other interests. This watch had everything that I needed, and this was the third one that I've owned that's a Pathfinder. I got the first one, I loved it, got a second one after that one broke down, loved that one until the strap fell apart. And it's like, I want something that doesn't fall apart. And here's one that is over 50, it's close to 20 years old. Okay, never changed the battery on it. The point being is that I've had this passion for watches. I've always had a watch on my wrist. But the collecting part of it, or the variety part of it, was always there. But it was like, I'm just going to wear the one watch. I don't need a bunch of watches, right? So for those of you out there that are like with the one watch collection, that's fine. I totally get it, because I was that way for a long, long time.
yeah, the utility of it is 5%, especially when you get into collecting, because it shows the time.
Yeah,
Every watch shows the time.
yeah,
But as far as collectors are concerned, it's much more than that, obviously.
yeah. You start to see the artwork, the design. You start to see the mechanics of it. You start to see the different layers of what makes a watch, and what makes a watch different from another watch. And then the fascination, for me, the fascination just exploded. It's like, oh man, that is so cool. The material that they're using, like a bronze case, is just one of those things I've watched over the months of the watch that I have just change and darken over time. And it's like, and it changes the complexion of the watch too. So there's all these different factors and things that go into it. So as far as my watch collection goes, last year it was one watch. Right now it is way more than that. So yeah, just a bit. But like Noah was saying, like I've got watches that are of the same category. So multiple chronographs, multiple field watches, multiple dive watches. And I look at those differences even in that category. So I'm splitting the hairs a little bit finer and saying, well, that dive watch is significantly different from this dive watch. And so I go down that rabbit hole and get another dive watch. So I have maybe a handful in each one of these categories, depending on the category. And then I've gotten to the point now, and I was telling my wife about this, is like, I think I'm not seeing a lot of differences out there that are really grabbing my attention. Like the differences are even smaller. So for me to go down that rabbit hole, I'd have to split the hair even finer. And I'm not willing to do that right now. And I'm not sure my wife is willing for me to do that right now. So, but anyway, so we'll open the suitcase. And so there it is. But as you can see, different styles, different categories. But when you're collecting watches, like you get to see the different colors. Like one of the things I've gone through is like different colors. Like I've found red to be really interesting, kind of a more pale yellow. And you see some of these reviews. Most of these watches I've reviewed. The digital or the Casio version, the resin case piece. There's a few of these that I'm going to get rid of because I've done the review and I'm going to pass them on. So I'm really kind of getting into this mode of like 3, 4, 5, and then I really start to put the brakes on because I'm not sure that in my mind, there's enough differences out there to justify more than that. So this is pretty much the collection and a whole wide variety of things that that I like about them. And there are some things that I look at, it's like, well, man, those are kind of similar in some ways. So field watches and pilot watches are like, that's like my Achilles heel, I think, when it comes to watches. I just love the simplicity of them. I love the history. I love the vintage look of them. Dive watches, it's funny, when I first started last year really getting into this, I did not want to have dive watches. I'm like, they're kind of the same. I'm not so sure about dive watches. I didn't really, and here I have, I don't know, 6 or 7 of them.
Mm-hmm. Now, what you did is pretty cool because you have different colors of the same style, which would probably be the next thing that I would do is if I was going to buy, the same watch from the category, with just a different color. It is pretty funny to be talking about our favorite colors and watches, but it is a big part of the design, obviously. So you have, the dive watches, you have green, red, you have a white dial, just so, I mean, those make a difference, and I can see myself possibly getting into that route. But as far as kind of having a couple watches that I like, I really just like wearing it for a long period of time. I almost kind of like having a watch associated with me, which I don't know how egotistical that is, but just kind of someone seeing that watch and be like, oh yeah, that's Noah's watch. And I don't know if anyone would do that, because
I would say you guys remember me wearing this watch for a while, right?
See, that is his watch. Like I
wore that.
Associate that with you.
Yeah, when these guys were kids. I mean, this is 20 years of me wearing just one watch, 24/7. This is the watch I wore all the time, and the story behind this is I did this because almost 20 years earlier I got lost in a swamp in Minnesota, like completely turned around. I didn't know which way to go. It was on a cloudy day, and when you're looking at just swamp grass, there is no, hey, the moss is growing taller on this side of, there's no trees, it's grass.
So he created a sundial.
Yeah, so anyway, it freaked me out, and so I got into the Pathfinder series, and that's the watch that I had for decades until I saw this. Now, when I was a kid, and I think this is the personality side of this. When I was a kid, I enjoyed looking at different watches. There's the Arnie watch, the Casio Arnie.
Ridiculous.
I coveted that watch.
Stupidest thing ever.
It's so huge and so bulky, but it had the analog dial, it had the digital stopwatch, it had the timer. I was like, that is so cool. And when you put it on, you are the toughest guy on earth because it's an Arnie watch. So that was, and I knew I wasn't going to get it. I wasn't really sure that it would fit my wrist anyway, but because Arnold's just a huge guy.
He's a little bit bigger than yours.
He's quite a bit bigger than me. But so I always had this like interest in other watches growing up, and I think that's kind of what you're saying too. You had this interest in other watches as you've gotten older, and for me, I'm okay with having multiple watches, and I actually wear all of these watches. This is my 3rd watch today, and part of it is because I'm just doing very different things. So I just put on a different watch. And part of me is like, well, I got to wear this watch because I haven't worn this one in a while. And so there is that. I go back to like, well, when I had just one watch, it was kind of boring. Me.
But that
was for me.
It was pretty cool, though, because it was associated just with you, and we always saw that watch as like, that's Dad's watch. And, I mean, I guess celebrities kind of have those. What was that Daytona that sold for millions of dollars?
Oh, that was Paul Newman?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Paul Newman Daytona.
One day, this watch will be worth tens of dollars on the internet.
Tens of dollars.
Yeah.
Maybe 20s.
Yeah.
A couple of Andrew Jacksons.
But that is kind of a thing for me. Like, I like wearing kind of a similar watch over and over and over, kind of having that watch be seen as mine. Because if I were to have all of these, that wouldn't be a horrible thing. But I would just kind of feel bad that I couldn't wear all of them maybe as much or as obsessed as I am. Like, I'm really obsessed with each of these watches, and so I want to almost wear that to reflect that.
Okay, let's go. You got the positive. We talked about the positive of my side, positive your side. What's the downside of what you're doing? What do you see if you could flip the coin and be fair in the conversation? Like,
right.
What's the downside for what you're doing from your perspective?
Right. I mean, customizability. If we're just taking strength versus strength, if I want to wear a dress watch, I wear this watch. And if it doesn't necessarily match with something, too bad. That's my dress watch. Or I'll pick a different one and try to do that. So I don't necessarily have the same variety. I mean, that's the biggest thing.
I think the downside for me is the idea that I haven't worn a watch for a while. And it kind of bothers me because I don't want to have excess stuff to the point where I haven't worn that watch for months. Like, I don't want to go there at all. But even with this number of watches, like this is one watch a month, one watch a day for a month, basically, I get a little bit like, well, man, I haven't worn that watch in a while. Should I really be having that watch? Like, you almost feel guilty for having that much. I feel a little bit guilty having this much stuff.
And I would get obsessed with wearing like a single watch. Like your Adamascus right there. Yeah. I love that watch. I would be wearing that watch so much that it almost wouldn't justify maybe purchasing.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. At the same time, I love the variety. Like when I pick a field watch up, it's like, oh man, this one is different. And again, when you start splitting the hairs a little bit finer, you start to see the differences, and you start to really appreciate the differences. And so for guys out there that have, and gals, that have hundreds of watches in their collection, I get it. I'm not there. Right. But I do understand why. So,
and I could totally be justifying the fact that I have 4 watches.
Yep.
But I have no money. So that could be just be me saying, I don't want to buy any more watches. It's more like I can't buy any more watches.
Yeah.
But I do agree with some of the stuff that I was saying as far as, only having a couple and wearing them. If I had a bunch, I probably would still be accepting watches if I was given one.
All right. So two pieces of advice. What would be the 2 things you would say to a person who's interested in getting past one watch in their life? Because I think a one watch collection is not really a collection. It is like, it's a watch, it's utility, it covers all kinds of bases. Yeah. I think you have to have more than one to have a collection. That's my personal definition. But so for those that want to get past the one into multiple, what are a couple of pieces of advice that you have?
So I'd say just go polar opposite. If I went from an Apple Watch to a Casio, the G-Shock, right away, I don't know if there'd be enough differences for me to continue to buy different watches, or covet or want different watches that are out there. But I think going from something that is boring and kind of black band to something a little bit more shiny, that kind of piqued my interest. Like, now I have 2 situations that I'm wearing a watch for, and then from there kind of going completely the opposite to something more simple, dress watch, completely different. You can see if you like it. Obviously, if you don't like it, not much you can do about that. But I would say just kind of jump to the other end, find something you do like, and then you have kind of a completely different reason to wear that watch versus something you have. Yeah,
I think it goes along. I'm going to add to what you're saying. I think it goes along with having a different shirt for different occasions, different pants for different occasions. Like, they truly do serve different things. When I wear a watch like what I've got on right now, this serves a completely different purpose than, say, one of my Casios, which I wear when I'm outside working. And like, I wouldn't wear this out cutting firewood. I could. It would probably handle it, but that's not what this, in my mind, this is all about. Again, splitting those kind of purposes down into an even more finer of a category. Anything else?
I don't think so.
I think for the 2 that I have, don't be afraid to buy whatever it is that is of interest to you and within your budget. And I mean budget as in you can actually pay for it right now.
The number one.
You talked about
collecting.
Right. Don't go into debt. I love Kevin O'Leary's thing is never go into debt buying a watch. I 100% agree with that. But I want to point out something, that the Movement Watch Company gets a bad rap for providing watches to people that they're interested in. And it's like, okay, so they do it a different way, or they had spent a lot of marketing, or, I'm not sure if it's misleading or whatever, but the point is somebody's interested in that watch. Yeah. They provide the watch. It's of a certain price point that they can afford. I think that's the way to go. I've got watches in here from AliExpress. I've got watches like a Hamilton, Swiss made. I love them both. I think it's great, but I have no fear in saying, like, go out and buy this watch right here. Is $25. This is one of my favorite field watches. This is the Infantry MDC. It's $25 on Amazon, and I have a hard time, like, I don't want to give this one up because it's such a cool little, and it's a quartz watch it's just kind of this cool thing. So I really do appreciate the watches for the watch themselves, and really try to ignore some of the static around the status of some of these companies or the status of some of these watches. And by doing that, you end up with a suitcase full of watches.
You heard it first. Focus on status, save money.
Yeah, so... But again, I'm to the point of saturation for now anyway, and I do sincerely think that you're to the point of saturation for different reasons. But I think just respect those reasons. Go at a pace that you can afford, and if you need to slow down, just slow down. Like, and wear your watches. Like, get them on your wrist and wear them. And if you're not wearing them, in my opinion, it's time to get rid of them. Find somebody who doesn't have it or who wants something like that, and spread the virus.
Exactly. Give away the watches that you're not wearing to your second oldest son.
Right. Okay. So anyway, we'll wrap this up. That's kind of our conversation just about different collecting styles, and we'll close the case on this one. But if you have any other ideas, comments, or questions, put them down below. My name is Tim. This has been another Real Ideal Gear Review, and we'll catch you guys next time. And you know what we'll do is we'll just kind of blow through it maybe a little bit faster.
That's enough out of you. Welcome back to Real Ideal Gear Reviews. My name is Tim, and this...
All right, ready? 3, 2. Is it recording?
Yeah, it's been recording.